We're now live on YouTube. This is the November 7th, 2018 edition of the modules team meeting. We have a full agenda and we have quorum right now, which is exciting. We'll jump right into it. The first agenda item that we have is adding Raizou Koukin as an observer. Does anyone object to adding them as an observer to the meeting? No objections, we can move forward with that. I'll take care of adding them in the GitHub IAM. The next one that we have at is B. McNaughton requesting for an observer status. Do we have any objections to that? Awesome, that goes through. Next we have ESM Refactor dynamic modules. I believe that this was something that Gus was running with. Gus, is your microphone working today?
Should be.
It appears to be. Do you want to explain what's going on here? With the pull request 9 on ECMAScript modules?
Sure, okay. Basically, following a big refactoring / feature addition I did to core, I was able to change our dynamic module wrapper to use a single module wrap instead of 2 module wraps. Yeah, it's not a behavioral change, it's just a refactoring. So, I mean, it's just like a pretty basic optimization to, help with making this go faster. That's about it.
All right.
Did we just lose Miles?
He had to leave, I believe.
Yep,
Oh, did he already leave? Sure. All right. Salah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I just have a quick question because I know at some point with the 2 modules, basically one of them had like an evaluation that happened in the end. So is that now just like not going to be a feature of the module wrap at all, or is it still there?
It is still there. Basically, instead of calling a function when the second module is evaluated, I call a function when the first module is evaluated, and basically the second, there were 2 modules. The first one was evaluated immediately, contained a mapping of exports, and the second one was inserted into the actual big module graph and evaluated in the correct place where it should.
Yeah.
For the rest of evaluation, I've effectively gotten rid of the first one. The second one is the only one that's left. And basically, instead of calling the function that is injected into it via the completion value of evaluating it, it's doing it by calling import.meta.done, which is injected basically by lazy evaluation of initializing the import.meta object.
Okay, and that benefits from dynamic modules at all, or?
It doesn't have.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm sorry, but this is specifically about approving the PR. Is this necessary to dig into for the approval?
That's fine. That's fine. I can get more details offline. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So quickly to those, and Gus and Salah, sorry for cutting you off. We just have a limited agenda time for this item. Do we have any objections to landing this PR? And then an extra question for you all, because this is changing something that exists in the upstream implementation and we have to rebase, does anyone object to this being upstreamed? Salah, you have your hand up. Is that in relations to this?
No, I actually didn't lower it. Sorry.
No problem. Gus, would you be able to take the action item of landing this in the ECMAScript modules repo and upstreaming it?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everyone. On to the next item. on the agenda is another 5-minute item. It's add formal distinction to phase 2. We could potentially, use less time. That'd be nice. Guy, this is yours. Would you be able to start the discussion on this?
Sure. So what we have in the minimal implementation at the moment is only support for a top-level node execution of ES modules, and well, actually of MJS ES modules, and you can only import from ES modules. So I just wanted to make sure that we are including in the phase 2 process a consideration for the semantics between knowing when you're running an ES module, when you're running CommonJS on both the top level and for dependency imports, so that we can include that as part of the phase 2 discussion process, because it would be nice to discuss this properly. For example, I still have the mode proposal that I would like to be able to present to the group, and to integrate this into part of the phase 2 process before we get too far away from it again. Yeah, just to add it as an item there. Would anyone object to that?
Looks like we're good to land it. Guy, would you take the action item of landing that pull request and kicking off the necessary discussions to move it forward?
Sure, I can do that.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have a very, very quick update on progress from Salah about the surveys. This is a 1-minute item. Salah, to you.
Yeah, I actually want to avoid making it a discussion or anything. I just want to bring attention to issue 209, and just the fact that I think as a group, we really have to decide whether, not whether, how we want to proceed about the survey. It requires a lot of effort that has to be distributed, and I don't think there's more I can do about it, from my position. But I would like us to actually see it happen. So, thank you.
Okay, great.
Can you be? Is there a?
Yeah, Jan, were you adding something? Go for it.
Sorry, forgot about the hand raising. Is there a specific list of what we still need to do, or is it basically just a big bucket of stuff that needs to be done?
I think it's at a point where people really have to come up with the questions they want to see answered. I don't want to push questions which I know should be answered, because I'd rather be the one who's orchestrating the thing, helping the process, doing whatever needs to be done. But the questions have to come from people who, have direct relationship with the outcomes of those questions. I'm happy to help, but I cannot do it on behalf of them because it will be very counterproductive to get results from such questions, I guess. If you're not involved and you don't like.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm asking is because this survey. So the reason why I'm asking is because we have this survey topic open for a while now, and it seems like the last couple of meetings, it was always I guess we should make progress, and please let's make progress. But I'm missing what are the things, right? So if I don't have additional questions, what can I do? Anything? Should I make decisions on anything? Should I sign off on anything to make it happen?
The conclusion was the questions that we have so far were like dummy questions at best. They were questions with a lot of effort and a lot of thought, but they were not the questions that people wanted to see in the survey. Then we left it at, okay, so what questions would everyone like to see there? I'm not in the position to write those questions unless I get input from people who would like to see the questions written in a particular way.
Hey, everyone, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've gone quite a bit over the time box for this.
Let's
suggest that we bring that to the issue, please.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item that we have on the agenda is keeping ECMAScript modules up to date. This is one, I believe it was opened by Gus. We have the ECMAScript modules repo now that has not been actively rebased against master. We do need to be like kind of keeping an eye on things and making sure if there's conflicts, those are getting fixed. There is a process in place that has been done by other forks that we use, such as our Canary fork and our V8 fork. I believe that Michael, who's on the call, can talk a little bit about that. So I'll just kind of leave it to everyone. We'd love to reach consensus in this meeting about specifically how we're going to manage that repo, how we'll rebase it, and whether or not we want to have, pull requests open or some sort of way of like auditing when it was rebased and what changes were needed to be made. So I kind of leave it to the floor. Gus, if you have specific things you'd like to add, please do so. Since we have a lot of silence right now, I can just suggest something. Oh, Guy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
Oh.
sorry, I can't put my hand up here as a
Yeah.
co-host either. But I'll go after you, Miles.
I was going to suggest that we rebase, and as long as there's no conflicts, we just allow force pushes on the fork. And then alternatively, if there are any sort of conflicts, that those come in a pull request so that we have documentation of the conflicts that have been resolved. Does anyone object to that or have a suggestion of alternatives we could do?
I was wondering if we could not, because it's a regular process and it's nice to be able to have review on it, but it's difficult to review when it's a kind of a force push process. So if we could maybe have some kind of 2-branch model where we have the last good rebase and then someone does a new rebase to like a current rebase branch, and then we can check the diff afresh against, and then we have exactly, last known good revision. And then if we have another branch that's tracking node master, we could run a PR from the latest rebase against master, review it on that PR, and then have an actual, make sure that it's had some kind of sign off, maybe even in the meetings to say, let's review the latest rebase or something. Just in case there are conflicts. I'm not familiar with the other processes, but that's just what I was thinking
of. Jordan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just saying, I like the idea of a PR to review the changes coming in, but I'd want to make sure that they weren't merged with like any of the 3 options available in GitHub's UI, that they were done as a fast forward merge on the command line so that the repo history we have is as close as possible to our changes directly on top of an exact copy of node master. Like the whole purpose of the rebasing is so that we can upstream these things eventually. And so we don't want to have our history littered with merge commits and like differences between the 2 repos. We want to have like our changes just sitting directly on top. So that's kind of that's bike shedding stuff I guess we can talk about separately, but.
Guy, you've got your hand up?
So just agreeing with Jordan there, and kind of what I was envisaging if we could do a PR model was each PR would be the full implementation of the minimal repo rebased. So it's every commit from our first commit on the minimal repo to the last for each time being reviewed.
Do you think that perhaps then it makes sense that we could make the default branch like modules LKGR and then actually just keep the master up to date, and then we can just be rebasing the separate branch? So like we're not actually having a conflict of what master is as a source of truth?
GitHub lets you change the main branch shown when you land on the project, right? So we could do that, fine, yeah.
Because that way we could then just be like essentially resetting master constantly against the head. We could even automate that. And then we would just need PRs to like essentially update what our LKGR branch is. Are there any, Raizou, Ken, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so just to weigh in here, this is pretty much exactly what we do on the Canary fork. So what happens is there's a CI job that runs daily, and it just auto rebases and force pushes to that branch. And in case there are any like build failures, if there are any merge conflicts, then it just sends an email to Michael and me, and somebody just looks into it and solves the issue. It's usually something with the zip files, but like there's a couple of things that could happen here, and just it's fixed wherever a new commit's landed. It's force pushed to the branch, and CI turns green.
That sounds like a pretty robust and automated system and less error prone. Does anyone object to, I guess Raizou or Michael or someone who works on the Canary, just writing up a proposal for that and maybe kind of kicking it off? Gus, as you're the one who made this issue, is that something that you'd want to help out with as well?
I can look into it. I don't know if I'm the person to be actually designing the system that we would use, but I can try to follow up with people.
Okay. Is there anyone on the call other than myself who's in the build working group who could help creating a new automated CI job? So it seems to me then what we probably need to do is outline exactly what we're going to do inside of the issue. Raizou, Koukin, if you could take the action item on just kind of documenting what you just said inside of the issue, and maybe we can at the build working group about spinning this up. It seems like it would be more or less a copy paste of the Canary one, just changing the target repo. And
yeah, totally. I can take that up.
Yeah, and then all we would need to do, I guess, is whenever that CI goes red, then we can open an issue and reach consensus on, fixing it and what needs to be done to be fixed, because it sounds like that's essentially what's going on in the Canary branch.
Totally. Just one single problem. As we discussed, it's usually a mess to review those, but as soon as once the the conflicting commit -1 commits are force pushed, then it's pretty easy. So maybe you could find out another way to just reach consensus on force pushing everything except for the change that needs to be done to turn CI green, because otherwise it's just too much of a mess to review those PRs. Gus once run into one of those, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Do you want to then just suggest a full process that we can move forward with? And I guess maybe in the meantime, we can just do a one-off with Gus rebasing and keeping it up to date with where it currently is, because I think we're a couple weeks behind. And Gus, if there's any conflicts in where it is right now, we can just open an issue to manage, sign off on that one conflict, or open a pull request to fix that one conflict. Does that seem to work for everyone?
I'm good with that.
That should actually, in theory, work better than the other thing.
Okay, cool. I think we can wrap this one up with a little bit of time left over. Does anyone have any last minute thoughts? Jordan, you have your hand up. Is that to add something right now?
No, it's from before.
Okay, cool. So that wraps up that agenda item. The next one that we have coming up is a 10-minute item from Guy on the status of dynamic modules. I'm going to have to drop now. So if someone else can take up sharing, I've made Brad the host. If someone else would someone else volunteer to be managing the time clock and moderating?
I can help with that.
Okay, thanks, Guy. Everyone have a great meeting. Sorry to have to leave early. Excited about how fast these things are going right now. It's great. See you all soon.
Okay, so it's actually a very brief update on dynamic modules. I just wanted to mention that the implementation all worked out fine in V8. So for those not familiar with the background on it, Gus originally wrote a PR to support importing named exports from CommonJS in ES modules. And that was blocked because of the fact that if you're going to, Gus saying there, it's a terrible PR. It was blocked because of the fact that you basically need to know the export names before you execute the module in the ES specification. And for CommonJS, we only know the export names after we've exported the module and everything's been written onto the exports object. And that being a sort of a breaking of invariance, because in CommonJS, you don't want it executing out of order with everything else in the ES module tree. You want CommonJS execution failures to happen at their correct point of execution in the graph. And you want predictable execution when you have ordered imports. So that was a kind of a blocker on that one. And then what we determined was previously, I mean, TC39 were aware of this issue, and there were previous discussions over the many discussions over compatibility from TC39 around ways that the spec might be changed. And so we basically got what ended up as a Node.js specification, which is at the GitHub repo dynamic modules on the Node.js organization. And that's a spec to basically allow these special type of dynamic modules to define their exports during the execution phase, which is currently not permitted in the ES module semantics that are defined in ECMA 262. And there's a few esoteric edge cases around that stuff, like what happens if you've got a dynamic namespace in a circular reference that star re-exports from a dynamic module, and then you don't know what the export names are. And we kind of solve those by creating a sort of a TDZ and throwing in those cases. All of that stuff worked out fine. It involves a very small spec change to TC39, which TC39 said they wanted implementation feedback. So we've got an implementation in V8 now that does all this stuff, does all the error handling. And I've worked with George and Yang on it, and they've given feedback. So the situation at the moment is it's all worked out, it's all possible. And it's going to be mentioned at the TC39 meeting at the end of this month. And the goal with that is basically to get a provisional approval of the spec changes that we need in ECMA 262. A provisional approval that if V8 wants to merge it, then TC39 will be behind it. And then that'll allow us as Node to say, do we want to merge it? And if we want to, then V8 can merge it. So it's kind of a 3-layer thing. And we're getting permission from the lower layers that we know it can work out. At the end of the day, what it means is that we as a modules working group can assume that we can support named exports from CommonJS while respecting execution order in the graph. If anyone wants to go into the deeper details on the spec, please feel free to open an issue and discuss any of the stuff with it, on it with me. But apart from that, if we want it, it's there. If we don't want it, it doesn't have to go through. But that's basically what the situation is today. Jordan, have you got your hand up there?
Yeah, I was just going to say I got that on our radar, that PR to the spec for the editor group today. So we should hopefully have it to a point where it's mergeable with consensus, and right. The meeting at the end of this month. Hopefully, I don't know if that would be soon enough to get that consensus, but the sooner we can merge that, the better.
Great. I mean, the other thing is, like, even if it doesn't get merged, it's seeking a kind of a provisional approval that it can go in if V8 wants it, and if we want it, V8 will want it. So that's what I think. Jill?
Yeah. What was the change in the spec that was needed?
There were 2 small spec changes that were needed. I'm just seeing if I can find the link for you now. In the status issue, there's a link to the PR, but basically 2 things. The one is that we need to be able to throw during the instantiation phase. If you have star exports from a dynamic module, then it, in turn being imported as a namespace in a circular graph with a leaf that's unexecuted. that exposes that namespace to functions before the dynamic module itself is executed. So that was just saying that we're allowed to throw in the get exported names function. And then the other one is just because of the fact that you need to track those namespaces to kind of say if you've got a namespace that star exports from one of these dynamic modules and that namespace is exposed, we need a way to know what all those namespaces are, because those namespaces are created during instantiation and then they need to be extended with the exports to the dynamic module that were added at execution because of the sort of phases. And so just adding one parameter to the get exported names function so we can track all the namespaces that star export from dynamic modules. It's super esoteric. I'm sorry, I can't explain it more clearly. Given
I think I understood well, vaguely. First of all, I'd like to say that this is the whole thing in a really positive way. So kudos, and I'm assuming that these changes don't affect ES modules at all, right?
No, they don't. Well, I mean, so Gus's PR earlier with that dynamic modules, also called dynamic modules, that could actually be written in these dynamic modules. So it could have some other assistance in our code base, but apart from that, they're entirely their own thing.
Great, thanks.
Clarify language. The language on this is actually dynamic source text, isn't it?
Dynamic modules is what they're currently called. So source text being modules that are based on a underlying JavaScript source. Dynamic modules being module records. Dynamic module records being based on sort of programmatically created and defined during execution. Okay, if no one has anything else to add to that, the next agenda item is also another one I just wanted to present quickly, and that is a PR to the minimal repo to add a spec to the README that covers what we're currently implementing for the ES module resolver, being a new URL-based resolver with its own behaviors. And one of the key ideas here was to help us to continue to develop this resolver by having an implementation that exactly matches a spec, and then a spec that we can PR against and work on, knowing that it's in full parity with our implementation as well. I've got a short presentation on it. I'll just try and share my screen if this works out. I'll just share that link as well. Where's this? Okay, where do I find the chat window to paste this? There we go. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, mixing up my interfaces here. I don't even know where I am anymore. Okay. Apologies. Where did this page go? Okay, I'll paste in the link. All right. So resolver spec. It's PR number 12 on ECMAScript modules. And the goal of this, as I say, is to create an exact spec that exactly follows what our current minimal implementation has implemented for the resolver, to treat the spec as a source of truth so we can have PRs against the spec. And in the process, I've also included some refinements to the resolver and some improved error handling. To give an idea of the types of refinements, there was some legacy code referencing index.mjs We don't currently have any main entry point implemented. So I've removed that. It removes some unnecessary error handling code. It creates a single not found error type. We have 3 at the moment. It adds some extra contextual error information and fixes a very specific case of package fall through for subpath requires. So here's an example of the type of thing. It's if for example you import a local module that doesn't exist right now in the minimal implementation, you'll get a module not found error, and it'll say cannot find module / does not exist. Now there's a few things that are tricky here. ES modules are quite different to require. In require, when you get a module not found, you can see the exact require that caused the bug. But in ES modules, because it's a resolver that's happening and it's not running through executed code, you don't know which file caused the issue necessarily. So the debugging information can be quite hard sometimes. The other thing is that the current node pattern is error _ and then the error code, whereas this is module not found without the error prefix. And there's no quotes around the specifier. So it's just updated these things. It's an error _ module not found. There's quotes around the specifier, and it includes the importing module in the text. So just trying to improve that. Another case is if the file would have been found by the CommonJS resolver. So for example, currently we don't resolve file extensions. If the module would have been found, then you'll get this error module resolution legacy error, which is distinct from the module not found error, when in fact they're still the same kind of error. So I've just unified those, still including the information saying that the legacy require would have found it at this path, but just unifying that a bit. And then in the spec itself, one of the things that spec does is it has a package main resolve section, because this is something that we need to think about how we're going to define the package main for ESM resolution. And at the moment, there's nothing in there. It's an empty slot in the spec for us to determine further. And this is something we can run PRs against and discuss proposals against. At the moment, this is called only for bare package imports like package or scope / package. So if you import a folder that has a main, it won't do this main resolve function in the current placeholder implementation. That's because of the fact that in our minimal implementation, we currently don't do directory indexes or directory mains. We can change our mind on that and add directory main support at any point, and this can be updated to do that. But in line with what we've implemented currently, it'll only do the main if you're importing a bare specifier like package or scope / package. And one nice consequence of that kind of thinking was that it fixed the historical issue where you get a subpath fall through in packages, which is the fact that if you're importing a subpath of a package and the package exists in your local node modules folder, it'll still keep checking all the successive node modules folders for that package and subpath, even if the package matched. So it kind of breaks a package encapsulation, and we've got a to-do in the resolver at the moment on that. And the error, again, also isn't very useful. You'll just get cannot find x / y. So I just kind of fixed that up so that if it finds the package x, but not its subpath y, the error thrown will say cannot find module, and it will actually point to the exact package location on disk. So you can then look in that folder and see why there's no y effectively. So getting the immediate path and the error and keeping the package encapsulation so that it didn't need to check node modules all the way up to the root to know that that there is no x / y. I don't know if that's ever come up in node issues for those who've been around for longer than me, but I haven't seen it personally. But it's kind of a side point to the overall process and something that fell out quite nicely. So yeah, that's about it. If anyone's got, all right, I'll stop screen sharing. Jill?
Oh, I have 3 concerns. I went over it today, mostly concerning the tweaks you did and making it basically different from common JS. So to enable the package fallback thing, which is a good thing, you had to parse the package name. You had to understand that it's either one directory or at directory / directory.
Yes.
I'm not sure the fact that we're now parsing package names is a good thing. And if the fallback packages thing was really a good idea, then maybe, but I don't think it's worth the effort, worth the fact that we understand how a package name should look like.
Yeah, so that kind of fell out of the fact that at the moment we don't have directory indexes. So we're only providing the main if you import a package form. So if you import a package without any subpath, and then you need to know if a bare specifier has a subpath or not. And to know if a given bare specifier has a subpath or not, we need to pass the package name, because you need to tell that it's just a package name. So it kind of fell out from that. If we add back directory indexes, we can cut out all this if we want to.
I totally understood that, and I think I added it in my comment that it's an either or you get the package fallback thingy, or you have to.
Yeah, you can, but you can have. We could have this, and we could have the package fallback solution, and also have directory indexes.
Okay, I tried to think it through. I couldn't figure it out, but we can hash it out in my comment.
Sure. I mean, personally, I would love it if we could get agreement on kind of getting this merged. And if we want to add directory indexes or take away the package fallback to do that with successive PRs, just because it would be nice to get this kind of spec. Otherwise, if people are having difficulty with it, I could take out that behavior and just whittle back this PR to something that we can all agree on. So please let me know what works for you.
I would prefer not fixing the fallback and not parsing the package names. But again,
but you would still not want directory indexes.
That's a discussion that we can have. I would prefer directory indexes. I would prefer packages and directories to be symmetrical and basically the same. But that's arguable. That's arguable. And the other thing is, I think there's a bug with built-in modules. But again, that we can hash out in my comments.
Bradley, you just mentioned Jan's had his hand up for a while, but I don't know if you wanted to.
I'm done.
I think my quick comment here is just would it help this case if we define, instead of define it as parsing the specifier, define it as finding the package boundary? And say, we try from left to right until we find a package boundary.
So the parsing is because if you have so you're saying check all the folders. I mean, you could stat down the subpaths, and that would give you the main thing if you take the first found package boundary, package JSON boundary, and you treat that as the package. It does mean that if you have something in Node modules without a package JSON, then we can't have like a default index support for that. But that could be.
Yeah, I guess I'm mixing right now the next bullet point in this meeting with this one.
Right. Okay. Well, we will hopefully have time for that, so don't worry. Bradley?
Sure. So I can just give some insight. We did actually go through the package fall-through case during the EP process a few years ago. We found one actual user of it, but we also found bugs caused by it. The one person using it was actually basically setting up a series of things where they would keep nesting Node modules and adding files for different situations. For their case, it was for production environments versus development environments and loading config files. Either way, when you instrument policies, and if you want to talk to the Node security working group, things get really weird if we allow fall through of packages. So a good example of this is going to be, say you have two versions of a vulnerable body parser. One has a ability to have a vulnerable file be loaded if you require body parser /a, but the patched version doesn't have /a. They got rid of that. So if you require body parser /a, import body parser /a, the problem is it can fall through back to the vulnerable version. Even if you try to say it's okay for you to import body parser from a package, you generally don't want them to import body parser /a, which could be something above you in Node modules. And so instead of having to do policies that work on one other package, you have to do it on everything that could cascade. So we should be wary about saying it's a good thing. It's a thing. We know of one person who uses it, but it seems problematic. So that's why we have that to do in the source code that we never got around because we shut down fixing source code for a while. That's it.
Jill?
Yeah, sorry, I may have not been clear. I think fallback is a bad thing, and I think fixing it is a good thing. But the price currently in the spec is the fact that we are parsing the package name and understanding the @ symbol and the fact that it's like either one level or two level deep, as far as I understand. If we can not parse the package name and not understand that and do it without costly IO, I'm all good for not falling back and not going up the levels.
I don't think there's a way to do it otherwise, apart from Jan's suggestion, actually, because otherwise, if we don't know scopes and you have scope /x /y, then how do we know that scope isn't the package, that at scope part of the folder? Otherwise,
exactly. It's either costly IO or understanding the package names, or just not doing the right thing with fallbacks.
I mean, let's be clear. It's costly IO as in the usual case, it's 2 stats at most.
I think that's a lot, but.
For what it's worth, the resolver, in writing out the resolver spec, it's amazing how few stats we have. It's been really great to see. The minimal implementation looks like, if we looked at the performance of it, I'm sure you'd find huge gains over the current Node resolver. That's an aside. Jill, could you maybe try and, look, we can bring the rest of the discussion to the PR. What I can do is if this is something that you're against, what I can do is see if there's a way that we can maybe remove that aspect. But the only issue is that that'll also mean removing the main placeholder, which we can do, and we can just take it out entirely and then come back to the main discussion. So does that sound like a suitable way forward?
Sure, yeah. And again, we can hash it out in my comments. I have 3 comments there. But if you take it out, I'm fine with that.
I'll try and separate it into two separate PRs then, and then hopefully, if everyone's happy with it, I would like to try and get it merged so that we can have a spec that exactly matches our implementation and continue moving forward with that. So if we can't do a vote today, please can everyone approve the PR when it comes, because it would be nice to keep this moving. So the next meeting we can discuss the next PRs that go against that rather than coming back to this one. And Jill, yeah, Wes has just posted a comment here, which I'm trying to pass. I'll look at it off. Let's finish the discussion offline. That's fine. Okay, we have about 10 minutes to discuss another proposal, an explicit package exports proposal. Jeffrey, did you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Or maybe, or Jan, did you want to describe it?
Sure, I can. Let me quickly share. Also, let me resize that window so it actually fits. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, looks good.
All right. So right now, the behavior of bare imports is very, well, bare. And so far, we don't have a clear way of handling deep imports, especially ones that canonically don't have extensions like React DOM/server. Nobody writes React DOM/servers.js, even though that's the actual file most likely behind it. And we don't have a way to actually specify the main field, specifically because of concerns about ecosystem collisions with the module field name and all that kind of stuff. So we went out and we got together and we tried to brainstorm what are the concerns and also what is a potential solution. And we ended up with this proposal. It's a first draft of what a solution might look like. So we are looking for somebody to poke holes into it so they can see that we harden it over time. There's already some open issues on this repository, but the basic idea is not too surprising, I hope, for most people, which is there's a field, it maps imports. One of the important pieces is that it is explicit. It actually defines a public interface for a module and does not allow arbitrary imports of nested files inside of the package. So you actually declare what the public interface of this module is. And module name /foo no longer means literally the file called foo in the package's root directory. That allows some nice things. Like, for example, if you want to expose all the files in source util, you can actually say, hey, all directory imports relative to this will be forwarded to this directory, and that is my public API. But you can also map the actual specifier. You can map any subspecifier. And we tried very hard to keep this interface as simple as possible. So the left-hand side is a simple string concatenation on the specifier. So the first one adds an empty string to moment.js/moment. So it's just moment.js/moment. The second one adds the trailing slash, which is kind of lifted from the import maps proposal, that a trailing slash signifies a namespace that can be used to append additional things. And then you can define arbitrary other entry points. So yeah, we wrote out some use cases, some usage both from the package author and from the package consumer side. But yeah, interested in any kind of feedback at this point. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Bradley.
Yeah.
So I read this over a bit. I'd like to see some mention, at least, of the problems that GraphQL and a few others were having when you do ship multiple modes of modules. And I'd also like to see how this is expected to be propagated to a loader. If there is an API, if there's not an API, I'm not really caring. But just like how a loader would be able to either interrupt this or look it up if possible. And that's it for me.
Just for the first question, you mean like a package author that wants to export or wants to publish a package, say, for use in future Node that supports ESM as well as legacy Node that needs CommonJS, like that kind of dual mode package?
Yes, because that's what main and export empty strings seem to be doing.
Yes. Okay.
So is it specifically about a package that used to have just a CommonJS interface? People were using it. Now the package ships an exports field. What should happen to the consumers that might have been using import to get the CommonJS version?
No. So GraphQL actually tried to ship 2 modes of packages at once and ended up having to remove their dual mode package and split it out into 2 separate packages because of problems with people using the APIs and getting different identities on functions.
Gotcha.
Well, I don't know specifically about them, but we did cover this a little in the proposal where, like, if it has this field, it's just, and you're using an import statement to pull from it, the field acts as a signifier that this should be imported as ESM.
Yeah, the issue I think that Bradley is talking about is if you have anything that exports a class, React, GraphQL, and other parts of that same library are using instance of checks, for example, to verify that what you're passing in is an instance of the class provided by this module. If you have both a CommonJS version and an import version, and there's any chance that 2 different code paths might get one or the other, you now have 2 instances of the class. And if you create an instance in a CommonJS module in your application, and then try to render that component in a ES6 module file in the same application, they actually run 2 different versions against 2 different versions of the class. So an instance of check would just fail because it is 2 different instances.
And any like shared file variables are not the same.
Yeah, what Bradley says about the shared cache.
Go talk to the GraphQL guys. They did a lot of research into this. Or Dan Abramov also has some opinions when he tried to create React app. That's it.
Thanks, yeah.
We have 2 minutes and then TSC is gonna kick us off. So do we have anything we need to follow up? I know Salah and myself have been having this kind of awkward conversation on GitHub. So we're probably gonna set up a meeting outside of this one about what me and Jan were trying to take offline last meeting, just to ease some tension. So if anybody is interested in shoving in-memory modules into the module graph, I'll be putting that on GitHub and just watch out for it. That's it.
And I would say for this, please go to this repo
Thanks.
and open issues so we can try to organize the discussion for feedback and improvements of this. And yeah, please, at least the 4 of us, I think, would be eager to join any more conversations that people want to have about this stuff of the module loading. The URL is in the issue for today's meeting. It's in the agenda.
Okay, we gotta go, but thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.